Hurricane Beryl in Caribbean coming close to Jamaica after hitting Barbados and Grenada. Israel attacked Khan Yunis again in Gaza. Black American women are hitting hard by abortion restrictions. Good morning. Welcome to Ahmed Shakil 5858. I am Ahmed Budnam. I am thankful to all international news resources and my team. Following are the news which have been reported by American, Australian, African, Canadian, Asian, and European channels. And of course, AFP, AP writers reported the same. Now the headlines. New rules proposed to protect workers from excessive heat in America. Sentencing of Trump in hush money case has delayed. Rudolph Giuliani disbarred. Supreme Court will hear many important cases in fall town. Stampede in religious gathering in northern India killed more than 100 people. 300,000 children displaced in Haiti. America pledged more aid to Ukraine. Ukraine and Hungary presidents meet. On Wall Street, Dow Jones Industrial, Nasdaq, S&P 500 all increased. Immunity decision fallout, guns in America, carbon-free town in Scotland. Biden must drop out. Water situation improve in Calgary, Canada. Beyoncé influence. In France, 200 parliamentary candidates bail out. Now watch the channels.
On this Tuesday night, pressure builds on U.S. President Joe Biden. The amplifying calls from Democrats for him to drop out of the race for the White House.
He's got to address it in a real way.
As Donald Trump uses the Supreme Court's landmark ruling on immunity as leverage. Hurricane Beryl barrels through the Caribbean, what makes the storm unprecedented and a warning to Canada's East Coast. Water woes, what thousands in Halifax have been ordered to do as Calgary's situation gradually improves.
This ain't Texas.
And breaking barriers at the Calgary Stampede.
I just saw myself represented, which historically I haven't been.
How Beyonce's big energy is redefining cowboy culture.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with what's going on in the U.S., both the impact of that unprecedented Supreme Court ruling that reshapes presidential power and the momentum building among Democrats to replace President Joe Biden. The Supreme Court ruling on immunity just 3 days before American Independence Day means presidents are no longer subject to the same laws as regular citizens. It shields former President Donald Trump, already a convicted felon, from prosecution. And it raises the stakes of this November's presidential election. President Biden slammed the decision in a speech last night, saying there are no kings in America and that no one is above the law. But will he even be the one who runs against Trump after last week's disastrous debate? Today, a congressman from Texas became the first Democratic member to say publicly what others are saying privately. Lloyd Doggett said in a statement, President Biden's first commitment has always been to our country, not himself. I'm hopeful that he will make the painful and difficult decision to withdraw. Is he an isolated voice, or has he opened a door for others to walk through? Jackson Prosco has our top story tonight on fast-moving political developments in America.
Caught in the eye of a political storm, President Joe Biden was kept away from reporters during a hurricane briefing, his future increasingly uncertain. 5 days after his disastrous debate performance, Biden still hasn't taken questions or held any unscripted events.
We are acknowledging what people are seeing, but we
wait until at least September. Donna?
Jackson in Washington. Thanks, Jackson. Trump's former lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, has been disbarred in his home state of New York. An appeals court in Manhattan found the 80-year-old former mayor of New York repeatedly and knowingly made false statements about the 2020 election results. The ruling also says Giuliani actively contributed to the national strife that followed and that he was entirely unrepentant. Giuliani still faces indictments in Georgia and Arizona over alleged efforts to overturn election results in those states. Hurricane Beryl is churning across the Caribbean tonight. It is a monster fueled by record warm ocean water and has killed at least 6 people. It grew into a Category 5 storm overnight, the strongest hurricane ever this early in July. Beryl is losing intensity, but will still be a dangerous storm as it hits Jamaica tomorrow and then is expected to track near the Cayman Islands and head towards Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. This is the eye of the storm. Atmospheric scientists flew into it to collect data. The calm there is stark contrast to the ferocious winds the outer bands of this storm are packing. Dan Spector reports.
Bridgetown, Barbados, rain later in the hurricane season. Dan Spector, Global News, Montreal.
There is some good news for Calgarians. Indoor water restrictions were lifted today for the city and several surrounding communities. They were imposed 26 days ago after a major water main broke. Calgarians are being urged to ease back into their typical indoor water use so the system isn't overwhelmed. In Nova Scotia, more than 200,000 people are under a boil water advisory tonight. People living in Halifax and the surrounding suburbs are being told not to drink their tap water after a power failure at a major water treatment plant. Heidi Petracek explains.
Rambler's Coffee Shop is finding ways to cope with for hours. Trying to figure out just what went wrong and why the backup failed will take longer. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
An Ontario doctor accused of killing 4 patients has been acquitted. Brian Nadler, who worked at a hospital in Hawkesbury, east of Ottawa, was acquitted of 4 counts of first-degree murder and 4 counts of criminal negligence causing death. In a pre-trial hearing last week, Nadler's lawyer successfully argued the Crown's expert witness wasn't qualified to speak to issues central to the case, including cause of death. Nadler said the 4 elderly patients had died of COVID-19. Canada's Justice Minister says there are reasonable grounds to conclude a miscarriage of justice likely occurred and has ordered a new trial for Clarence Woodhouse, an Indigenous man convicted in the 1974 murder. A jury found Woodhouse, his brother Alan Woodhouse, and his cousin Brian Anderson guilty of murdering Ting Fong Chan in downtown Winnipeg. Last year, a Manitoba judge acquitted Alan Woodhouse and Anderson, saying both were innocent. It is expected Clarence Woodhouse will be acquitted at a hearing later this year. A 4th man, Russell Woodhouse, was also found guilty in this case. He died in 2011. A posthumous acquittal has been requested for him, and Chan's murder remains unsolved. Canada has launched deportation proceedings against 5 more suspected members of the Iranian regime alleged to be in Canada. They're accused of holding senior positions in Iran's repressive government. Thousands of top Iranian officials are banned from Canada. Mackenzie Gray reports on why it could now be easier to remove those who have slipped in.
It's one of the most brutal regimes in the world, but somehow, senior members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard are alleged to be living in Canada.
There are more than 700 members of IRGC or those who are linked to Revolutionary Guards living in Canada.
The push to remove signed on it, why they were admitted to Canada in the first place.
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa, thanks. Horror in India. Coming up, what went wrong at a religious event that led to more than 100 deaths. In India, panic at a religious gathering caused thousands of people to rush out of a makeshift tent, and many of them were crushed in the mayhem. At least 116 people were killed, scores of others were injured. Neetu Garchar reports, and a warning, some of the images are disturbing.
A religious gathering in India's most populous state, Uttar Pradesh, turned fatal Tuesday night. This man saying, "I came to attend the event with 8 other people, but no one survived." This witness saying people started falling one upon another. Those who were crushed died. People there pulled them out. Local officials cite overcrowding as a major factor. They said despite the capacity of about 5,000 people, some 15,000 attendees had gathered for the event with Hindu spiritual leader Bole Baba. This district administrator said just when the event was about to start, overcrowding and excessive humidity sparked sudden commotion, and people rushed to leave a makeshift tent. Trucks and private vehicles were used to transport bodies to hospital, where distraught family members gathered to mourn. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressed condolences to the affected families and said the federal government is working with state authorities to ensure the injured receive help. The state's chief minister called the incident extremely sad and heart-wrenching, adding the cause is under investigation. The deadly crush underscores recurring safety challenges during large religious events across India. Neetu Garchar, Global News, Vancouver.
Still ahead, how Israel's prime minister is doubling down on the war in Gaza. There are more images from another terrible case of severe turbulence on a flight. It was so bad, some passengers say they thought they were going to die. 300 people were on board the Air Europa flight. One passenger says it suddenly destabilized and went into a dive. Those not wearing seatbelts were flung to the ceiling. At least 30 were injured. One man was later pulled from an overhead bin. The Boeing Dreamliner en route from Madrid to Uruguay made an emergency landing in Brazil. The University of Toronto has been granted an injunction against the pro-Palestinian encampment on its campus. Protesters have until 6 p.m. Wednesday to tear down and clear out. If they refuse, police can make arrests. The university argued demonstrators were trespassing and infringed on the rights of others to use the space. They've been camped out there for 2 months. Israel's prime minister appears to be under pressure from top military officials to pull out of Gaza, even if Hamas is still in power there. The New York Times article quotes anonymous military sources who say Israel needs a ceasefire in order to free the hostages and replenish depleted weapons and troops. Today, as Crystal Demanting reports, Benjamin Netanyahu sounded as defiant as ever.
As Israel Defense Forces engage in close-quarter combat with Hamas and other militants in southern Gaza neighborhoods, people are fleeing. The fate of those caught in the middle of the fighting remains top of mind. Crystal Demanting, Global News, London.
The president of Hungary made a surprise visit to Kyiv today. It's the first trip Viktor Orban has made to Ukraine since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion. He's just taken over as rotating president of the European Union, and he recommended Ukraine agree on a ceasefire. Orban has repeatedly blocked, delayed, or watered down EU efforts to help Ukraine, and he's been an outspoken critic of Western military aid. Next, how Beyoncé's new album is spurring inclusivity at the Calgary Stampede. Beyoncé became a superstar because of her R&B and pop music. Then she too stepped into country, and it's had a transformative effect on modern cowboy culture. As Joelle Tomlinson reports from Calgary, Beyoncé's new album is helping draw a whole new crowd to the Stampede.
Western culture was already having its moment. Then Queen Bey entered the scene in popularity.
making the Midway this year not just a celebration of Western heritage, but a new beacon of inclusivity and cultural unity.
It's very exciting to feel like you can be a part of the community.
And a place where Maria and others can feel a little more at home. Jamal Tomlinson, Global News.
That is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is something special from the weekend. If you haven't seen it, you need to.
I'm Amy Goodman. The United States Supreme Court ruled Monday Donald Trump has immunity from prosecution for official actions taken as president. The 6-3 ruling by the court's right-wing majority, including all 3 justices appointed by Trump, was issued on the final day of the Supreme Court's term and just 4 months ahead of the November presidential election. It will further delay Trump's criminal trial for leading the January 6th insurrection. The ruling upends more than 2 centuries of legal precedent for the first time, shielding U.S. presidents from criminal accountability. In a scathing dissent signed by Justices Elena Kagan, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote, quote, "Never in the history of our republic has a president had reason to believe that he would be immune from criminal prosecution if he used the trappings of his office to violate the criminal law. Moving forward, however, all former presidents will be cloaked in such immunity," she wrote. Donald Trump celebrated the ruling on social media, writing, "Big win for our Constitution and democracy, proud to be an American," unquote. President Biden denounced the ruling in a 5-minute speech from the White House.
This nation was founded on the principle that there are no kings in America. Each of us is equal before the law. No one is above the law, not even the President of the United States. But today's Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity, that fundamentally changed.
Monday's landmark ruling follows a series of high-profile corruption scandals at the Supreme Court, and after Justices Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas refused to recuse themselves from the case over conflicts of interest. That sparked some Democrats to call for their impeachment. On Monday, New York Congressmember Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wrote, quote, "The Supreme Court has become consumed by a corruption crisis beyond its control. Today's ruling represents an assault on American democracy. It's up to Congress to defend our nation from this authoritarian capture. I intend on filing articles of impeachment upon our return," she said.
Tonight, that monster Hurricane Beryl on a deadly path through the Caribbean, and the growing concerns tonight, it could hit the U.S. The devastating images coming in showing the scope of Beryl's destruction. An island community flattened in half an hour, entire neighborhoods leveled, roofs ripped off, boats tossed on their sides. At least 6 dead. We're live in Jamaica, now bracing for an impact. And could Beryl make landfall in the U.S.? The new track as we come on the air. Also tonight, sentencing delayed, with the Supreme Court ruling granting former President Trump limited immunity. His hush money sentencing that was set for 9 days from now being postponed. But for how long? President Biden under pressure, the first Democrat in Congress calling for him to drop out of the 2024 race after his debate struggles. And our new reporting on Hunter Biden, why he is sitting in on White House meetings with senior staff since the debate, the record July 4th travel rush, our rare access as the TSA screens for weapons among millions of flyers, our cameras there as agents search a bag and find this, a folding gun. The FDA approving a new drug to treat Alzheimer's, how it works, its big price tag, and will it be covered?
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Hey, good evening. I'm Tom Yamas, in for...
Breaking tonight, a monster hurricane turns deadly, and its track could take the storm to the U.S. Growing pressure on President Biden after that debate debacle, as the president now agrees to an exclusive interview with ABC News later this week, and sentencing delayed in former President Trump's hush money case. First, the most powerful July hurricane ever in the Atlantic, now taking aim at Jamaica. Beryl claiming at least 6 lives already. New and stunning images of the utter devastation left in its wake. Whole island communities decimated, hurricane hunters, and what they found inside the eye of the massive storm. And forecasters now say Beryl's track could potentially take it to the U.S. Gulf Coast. Faith Abube in Jamaica, with Americans desperate to get out. Also tonight, Americans from coast to coast on alert for dangerous and record-breaking temperatures. Officials warning to consider the heat in your holiday plans. Our weather team timing it all out. The pressure on President Biden intensifies. The first Democratic member of Congress calls on him to drop out, as a longtime ally, Nancy Pelosi, says questions about the president's fitness in light of the debate are legitimate. What a new poll says about Vice President Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. And tonight, ABC News announcing the first interview with President Biden since the debate, one-on-one with George Stephanopoulos later this week. Rachel Scott reporting. A New York judge delays former President Trump's sentencing in his hush money case, one day after the Supreme Court's landmark decision on presidential immunity. What that ruling could mean for this case and others against the former president. Aaron Kotursky from New York. Details just coming in of a massive home explosion in southern Wisconsin, a search and rescue operation underway. The holiday beach shutdown as Americans hit the roads and skies in record numbers ahead of the 4th of July. Why dozens of beaches are closing from coast to coast, the warning to swimmers. New hope for millions of Americans suffering from Alzheimer's as a new drug gains FDA approval. And America Strong tonight, 150 years and still going strong, will introduce you to some of the stars at America's first zoo.
From ABC News World Headquarters.
Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz. Jeff Bennett is away. On the News Hour
For the PBS News Hour has been provided by
Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz. Jeff Bennett is away. On the NewsHour tonight, Hurricane Beryl closes in on Jamaica after battering Grenada and Barbados. Israel launches another assault on Khan Yunis after previously claiming it had destroyed the Hamas battalions operating in the Gazan city. And a look at how abortion restrictions in the U.S. disproportionately impact black women.
There's both the financial costs of getting the care and the abortion itself, but also the logistical issues of traveling potentially long distances.
Welcome to the NewsHour. Hurricane Beryl is taking aim at Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, and Haiti after leaving a trail of destruction in the southeast Caribbean, including Grenada. The storm has killed at least 6 people in the region. In Barbados, high waters lapped against the shoreline as strong winds whipped through the trees. Beryl's strength has weakened from a Category 5 to a Category 4 storm during the day, but officials say it could still devastate island nations with life-threatening winds and storm surge. The Biden administration today proposed a new rule to protect U.S. workers from the dangers of excessive heat exposure on the job. It could be the first federal heat safety standard of its kind. President Biden said during a visit to Washington, D.C.'s Emergency Operations Center that the measure will save lives.
Across the country, workers suffer heat stroke or even die just doing their jobs. This new rule will substantially reduce heat injuries, illnesses, and deaths for over 36 million workers to whom it will apply, from farm workers to construction workers, postal workers, manufacturing workers, and so much more.
Among the proposed requirements, employers with workers routinely exposed to a heat index above 80 degrees must establish a heat injury and illness prevention plan. They must also offer rest breaks and access to shade and water for workers. And employers who fail to comply would face steep penalties. The White House says it will convene a summit on extreme heat later this summer. The judge in Donald Trump's New York hush money case has pushed his sentencing until September 18th at the earliest. It was originally set for July 11th. Judge Juan Merchan delayed to consider the possible impact of Monday's Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity. In May, Trump was convicted on 34 counts of falsifying business records related to a payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels. He has denied any wrongdoing. A Manhattan appeals court has disbarred former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani for repeating Donald Trump's lies about fraud in the 2020 election. The court wrote that the former federal prosecutor and Trump lawyer, quote, repeatedly and intentionally made false statements that, quote, baselessly attacked and undermined the integrity of this country's electoral process. Giuliani claimed he didn't know the statements he'd been making were not true. One day after closing out a momentous term, the Supreme Court announced several high-profile cases it will hear in the fall. One challenging the Food and Drug Administration's ban on marketing flavored e-cigarette products, another appealing a Texas law requiring that pornographic websites verify a user's age. But the court declined to hear a challenge to an Illinois ban on certain semi-automatic weapons and high-capacity magazines, a case that could have impacted more than a dozen state laws. Officials in northern India say a stampede at a religious event has killed more than 100 people, including many women and children. Local media said some 15,000 attendees of a Hindu gathering were trying to leave a tent meant to hold just 5,000 people. Relatives of the victims wept outside a nearby trauma center, and survivors spoke of the carnage that they saw.
People started falling one upon another, one upon another. Those who were crushed died. People there pulled them out.
I came to attend the event with 8 other people. None of them survived.
Authorities say heat and a lack of air inside the tent could have contributed to the disaster. The United Nations says that gang violence in Haiti has displaced 300,000 children in just the last 4 months. That's more than half of the nearly 580,000 people overall made homeless in the ongoing fighting. UNICEF says many kids are living in makeshift shelters, with some forced to join violent gangs just to survive. Those gangs now control about 80% of the capital, Port-au-Prince. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says the U.S. will send an additional $2.3 billion in security aid to Ukraine as he welcomed his Ukrainian counterpart to the Pentagon this morning. Ahead of closed-door meetings, Austin reiterated the Biden administration's unwavering support for Ukraine's defense against Russia.
We'll continue to provide the critical capabilities that Ukraine needs to push back Russian aggression today and to deter Russian aggression tomorrow. This package, under presidential drawdown authority, will provide more air defense interceptors, anti-tank weapons, and other critical munitions from U.S. inventories.
Meantime, in Kyiv, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky hosted Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban for his first visit since Russia's 2022 invasion. Orban has long criticized and even hindered the West's military support for Ukraine. He urged Zelensky to consider a ceasefire to accelerate peace talks. And Wall Street ended higher after Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell noted some progress on inflation. The Dow Jones Industrial Average added 162 points, the Nasdaq closed at a new record, gaining nearly 150 points, and the S&P topped 5,500 for the first time ever. Still to come on the NewsHour, after an historic Supreme Court decision, what history tells us about presidential immunity. New laws on tracking gun sales highlight the divide over firearms between blue and red states. And a Scottish oil town provides a test case for the country's pledge to be carbon neutral by 2050.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington, and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
Israel launched airstrikes into Khan Yunis overnight, a part of Gaza it already assaulted and left a few weeks ago. A ground operation now seems likely. It's not the first time in this now 9-month war that Israeli forces have claimed to clear Hamas from an area only to return weeks or months later.
In the streets of...
Yeah, that felt really good. Happy Tuesday, everyone. So in Monday's TV address, President Biden appeared to have a spray tan. Aides say he tried using a tanning bed, but when they closed the lid, Dr. Jill kept throwing dirt and flowers on top. When media brought up Biden's freshly darkened complexion, Democrat leaders replied that it's all part of their plan to gradually replace him with a person of color. U.S. military bases in Europe are on high alert because of intelligence about a possible terror attack. When reached for comment, Joe Biden said, "Someone should tell the president." The Biden campaign sent out an email accusing his critics of being a bunch of bedwetters. Well, isn't that the bedpan calling the kettle wet? Talk about projection. What's next? Calling Biden critics walking corpses who their pants in front of the Pope and won't acknowledge their grandchildren? Aw, a little... Ooh, did I hurt somebody's feelings? You know where the exit is. Democratic strategist James Carville doubled down on his warning that the Democratic Party's messaging is too feminine, though many observers would disagree. And Watergate legend Carl Bernstein says there's been a cover-up of Joe Biden's mental decline. And, like 50 years ago, he relied on an insider codenamed Deep Throat. Hi. Oh, you dirty pigs. So, we live in an incredible moment. It's not often we get to see a massive hoax exposed before us and the world. That sort of thing, when those in power are shown as evil liars, that only happens in movies. And, well, just every Scooby-Doo episode ever made.
I'm sure you'll recognize me.
Oh, Uncle Stuart!
Well. Hey! Just as we thought. Really, Ebenezer Sharp.
There is some movement, and I don't want to choose my words. There's some movement. There's been a response from there's been a response from the opposition, but yes, I'm sorry.
It's a perfect metaphor for this Biden mess, where we're told the villain is one thing, but it always turns out to be something else. Consider yesterday's Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity. In the dissent, Sotomayor hilariously frets about how far Trump would take it. She writes, quote, he now will be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival, immune. Organizes a military coup to hold on to power, immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon, immune, 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 immune. But that's all BS, and it's scary coming from a Supreme Court justice, some wise Latina. She makes AOC seem like FDR. Everything she suggests, the president would face impeachment for, and then a trial. But surprise, the media played along.
A gloves-off fistfight is routine in hockey. A shoving match in soccer, not so surprising. But what about a full-blown brawl on the golf course? Police had to be called in after golfers got into it in Burnaby, BC. CTV's Andrew Johnson is here now. Andrew, how did this happen? What led to this?
Morella police say this all started when one group of golfers repeatedly came close to hitting another group with their ball. But that does little to explain this level of violence in a place where class and etiquette are top of mind.
Oh my God. This is what played out in front of people enjoying a Canada Day long weekend round of golf at Riverway just outside Vancouver in Burnaby. One man can be seen punching another man on the ground after he was kicked. There is also a woman who appears to be injured laying in front of a golf cart. The woman was left with minor injuries, but although paramedics were called, no one was taken to the hospital. As police investigate what they're calling an assault, golfers we showed the fairway fracas to today are unimpressed.
That is shocking. I think those guys should be banned for a year from golfing.
I've had golf balls hit into me when I've been golfing as well, and maybe I haven't reacted so well in return, but you just have to take a deep breath and move forward.
In golf, it is considered disrespectful to hit your ball near other players, especially if you didn't yell "for" as a warning, and a close call may sometimes lead to an apology.
Natalie Savaricas, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.
Welcome to the Night Watch programme here on France 24. These are the top headlines. More than 200 parliamentary candidates bow out in the second round of voting here in France ahead of time to give a boost to others standing in the face of the far right. Veteran US lawmaker from Texas, Lloyd Doggett, becomes the first senior Democrat to publicly call for Joe Biden to abandon his re-election bid, following what was seen as a disastrous first debate against Donald Trump. And Jamaican residents brace themselves for Hurricane Beryl, the Category 4 storm that has already killed at least 6 people in the southeast Caribbean.
Tonight, a massive hurricane rips through the Caribbean, leaving a trail of destruction. and fear for those trapped in its wake.
He was scared. He was worried what the right thing to do was.
Where the dangerous storm could hit next, and why it has scientists so concerned. The entire city of Halifax under a boil water advisory.
Taking water out of the equation really messes things up.
The toll it's taking on local businesses.
Oh my God.
And a crisis playing out across this country.
Everywhere you look, it's overdoses.
The fight to save lives in a small Ontario city.
I don't consider myself all that different from the clients that we're trying to serve.
A new, very personal approach.
From CBC News, this is The National with Asha Tomlinson.
Good evening. Adrian is away. We begin with the monstrous Hurricane Beryl.
Hurricane Beryl roars toward Jamaica after causing devastation in popular tourist towns. There goes another roof.
It sets a precedent for a very, very dangerous hurricane season.
The powerful storm shattering records. Tonight we're tracking Hurricane Beryl as people try to get out of Jamaica. What the storm's new path may mean for the U.S.
There's a potential for the Texas coastline to be impacted by this weekend.
The CBS Evening News starts now.
Joining us here on France 24, I'm Alexander Rorcott. We begin here in France. After intense horse trading and backroom deals, more than 200 candidates have dropped out of the second round of France's legislative elections ahead of time. They're hoping to prevent the far right from gaining control of the National Assembly, the National Rally having topped the first round. Charlotte Hughes has more details.
Days ahead of the second round of the French legislative elections that could see the far-right National Rally clinch an overall majority, other parties across the political spectrum have called for a Republican front to block Le Pen's party. As of the deadline to register, more than 210 candidates confirmed that they would not stand in this weekend's runoff election in order to avoid diluting the anti-RN vote. They include Dominique Faure, the State Secretary for Rural Affairs.
It's a collective decision at the request of the President, at the request of the Prime Minister, because on a national level, today there are issues. Our country is in such a context that it's important to play collectively.
Among the candidates who stepped down, 131 were from the left and 82 were from President Macron's party. For National Rally leader Jordan Bardella, the alliance intended to exclude the far right is a sign the establishment is worried. Early Tuesday, Le Pen insisted she was confident that an overall majority was achievable for her party.
I can see the operations to demoralize our voters in the past 2 days, especially on TV bulletins, where some say that it's over, an absolute majority is not attainable. Well, of course it is attainable. We've already had 40 lawmakers elected, so of course this absolute majority is attainable.
289 seats are needed for an overall majority in the National Assembly. After the first round of voting, more than 300 three- or four-way runoffs had been foreseen. Now, just 109 will take place.
Next, US President Joe Biden has blamed jet lag from 2 overseas trips for his lackluster performance in the first debate against Donald Trump, widely seen as a disaster. The excuse came as some senior Democrats increasingly raised concerns about his ability to win the November vote, given questions about his age. Representative Lloyd Doggett of Texas has become the first to publicly call for him to step aside.
He's the first Democratic lawmaker to publicly call on Joe Biden to drop out of the presidential race, amid growing worries about the
Now we're going to take a look at some of the other stories making world headlines. Rudy Giuliani has been disbarred after a court found he'd repeatedly told lies about Donald Trump's 2020 election loss. It means the former New York City mayor can no longer practice law in the state, effective immediately. The Israeli army's biggest ground offensive is now taking place in Gaza's second city, Khan Yunis. The southern territory was almost wiped off the map by operations earlier in the year, and now the IDF has ordered its evacuation as it hunts down Hamas militants. In Tunisia's President Kais Saied has announced that elections will be taking place there on October the 6th, without saying if he'll seek a new 5-year term himself. The country has been in a state of political crisis since 2021, when he took full control of the country and dissolved the parliament. Next track, the Hurricane Beryl, which has killed at least 6 people already in the southeast Caribbean and is now roaring through open waters in the direction of Jamaica. Hurricane warnings have been sounded there, as well as on other islands in the year. Next, tensions remain heightened between North and South Korea as Pyongyang carries out still more ballistic missile tests in a protest against the joint military exercises ongoing between Seoul, Washington and Tokyo. The propaganda war has also intensified, with the sides trading leaflets and balloons across their shared border. For more details, our team have sent this report.
This activist, who opposes the North Korean regime, receives round-the-clock police protection.
I was attacked twice by North Korean terrorists. Once with a pistol and another with a poison needle. Thankfully, the police caught them.
Park sends 12-meter-high balloons twice a month over the border to North Korea. Each balloon carries 8 kilograms of anti-Pyongyang leaflets, US dollar bills, and USB sticks loaded with K-pop and South Korean TV dramas.
Thanks to K-pop, we can let North Korea know that people here live in a society that is rich, human, and free.
Park, who was born in North Korea, fled his home country after coming across similar propaganda literature sent from the free and democratic South. Today, the defector's actions are making headlines around the world. But not everyone agrees with what he's doing. Since the 28th of May, North Korea has retaliated by sending more than 2,000 balloons filled with waste and even excrement to the south. And these people living close to the border have had enough. They want activists like Park to stop provoking the North Korean regime.
Launching South Korean balloons is clearly an attack on the pride of North Korea, and as a result, the North Korean military become aggressive and threaten to shoot us. We're very anxious.
South Koreans are divided over the balloon war. In 2023, the Constitutional Court here in Seoul ruled that activists could not be banned from sending political propaganda to North Korea, as they were only affirming the freedom of expression. So we can expect that this balloon war will continue in the region.
And that's where we end this edition. Stay tuned for more world news on France 24.
Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, calls for President Ruto's exit grow louder as violent anti-government protests continue in Kenya. The country's Rights Commission condemns the use of excessive and sometimes fatal force on demonstrators. Also, villagers in DR Congo count the cost of pollution as their lives and livelihoods are placed in jeopardy by the dangerous runoff from copper and cobalt mines. Others reap the benefits of their country's mineral wealth as they pay with their health. And Tunisian athletes put their game face on just a few weeks ahead of the Paris Olympics, particularly those representing taekwondo and wrestling, the sports with the most qualifying Tunisian athletes. They're getting ready knowing the stakes are high. But first, in Kenya, crowds...
Ahmed Blin has won. Mauritania has secured his re-election for a second time, beating the national vote today. He emerged victorious in the first round with a comfortable margin, garnering 56.1% of the votes. His main opponent, anti-slavery activist Biram Da Abeid, received 22.1% of the votes and has contested the results, alleging fraud. The country's Independent Electoral Commission confirmed the results on Monday with a voter turnout of 55% out of the 2 million eligible voters. The Constitutional Court will now review the numbers before announcing the final results. As Aswani's victory solidifies Mauritania's position as a key ally of the West in a region plagued by instability and violence.
Protests continued in Kenya's capital and elsewhere Tuesday over a finance bill that raised the total cost of living, even after the president said he would not sign it in the wake of the storming of parliament last week. One of those protesting is Rogers Olo, a 26-year-old homeless, unemployed, and with nothing to lose apart from a bird of prey he found abandoned. We can hear the sound of rubber bullets, and they are using live bullets. The police should protect us. Instead, they are killing us. This is not fair. They should just use tear gas if they must. But now they are using bullets. Do they want to kill us? Like his bird, whom he has named Johnson, although lost his mother in 2011 and began living on the streets the same year, he is frustrated with how Kenya's government is operating. To be honest, if this is what the government is doing to us, Ruto should just leave. He is supposed to listen to common citizens. If he does not listen to the citizens, who will he listen to? We are the ones who elected him. The demos are still planned for this Thursday and Sunday.
Turkey mediated talks between Somalia and Ethiopia on Monday to ease diplomatic tensions between the two African neighbors, according to the Turkish Foreign Ministry. The Foreign Minister of Ethiopia, Tai Akse Selassie, and his Somalian counterpart, Ahmed Mualim Faki, had a candid and forward-looking exchange concerning their differences, facilitated by Turkey's Foreign Minister, Hakan Fidan. The tensions arose after Ethiopia signed a memorandum of understanding with the breakaway region of Somaliland in January, which Somalia condemned as a violation of its sovereignty and territorial integrity. The memorandum aimed to grant Ethiopia access to the sea through Somaliland in exchange for Ethiopia recognizing Somaliland as an independent country. A second round of discussion is scheduled in Ankara on September 2nd.
Weapons that grain. I that did it say, of course, have certain people
in
the world, whole developing world or a global south is in particular Africa is in the security, while the what we call it is represented there, which does not reflect the current state of world geopolitics. So these processes are happening. They are painful for some of them, but they will continue to shape the geopolitics for the future to come.
Being giant, the baby. South African rider to claim victory in a Tour de France stage on Monday. He crossed the finish line ahead of Fernando Gaviria and Arnaud Delier, completing second 5.
Wow, all of this is really heartbreaking and quite sobering to hear.
Family Mysteries, Saturday on CNA.
This is Asia Now.
Hey there, good afternoon. It's 12 p.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 9:30 in New Delhi and 11 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Ilakya Sundarajee. Let's have a look at the headlines this hour. For at least 121 people crushed to death at an overcrowded Hindu religious gathering in northern India in what government officials describe as the worst tragedy of its kind in more than a decade. Chinese President Xi Jinping to meet his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, where leaders are gathering for regional security and defense talks. China and the Philippines agree to de-escalate tensions and restore trust in the South China Sea following a violent clash in the disputed waters last month. More than 120 people have died in a stampede at a religious event. More than 120 people have died in a stampede at a religious event in the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh. Officials say it's one of the country's worst of such tragedies in more than a decade. While the victims, most of them being women and children, are still being identified by relatives. It's not yet clear what caused the incident. The religious gathering took place in Hathras district yesterday, just 200 kilometers southeast of the capital, New Delhi. More than 150 people have been admitted to different hospitals. Local reports say several bodies are lying on blocks of ice at a hospital in Hathras, as family members wait outside to claim the remains of their loved ones. It's estimated that more than 200,000 people attended the Hindu prayer event, and that's more than 80,000 people it had permission to host.
एक के ऊपर एक जो दब गए जो खत्म है फिर दो लोग वाले खींचे
आए थे हम 8 लोग एक वो एक नहीं कैसे हुआ क्या हुआ
As Neha Punia reports, police in Uttar Pradesh are looking to arrest the organizers and the self-styled guru who led the event.
You know, there are conflicting eyewitness accounts that have come to light, but that just speaks of the kind of panic and chaos that led up to that tragedy. Some eyewitnesses talking about a possible dust storm that sparked panic right after that Hindu religious gathering ended. Some others talking about how there was a rush of devotees to try and meet the self-styled godman right as he tried to leave the exit, and that's what led to the crush and the stampede after. But there are also other eyewitnesses who've spoken about the kind of conditions that existed, saying that the road and the venue had muddy, uneven surfaces, and the exit was blocked by vehicles. And that's what sparked panic as people were trying to leave that makeshift tent that was erected about 200 kilometers from Delhi. But one thing that is common in every single account is that there was certainly overcrowding. Something sparked panic, and that's what led to that huge death toll. Now, official teams are in Hathras this morning looking at the venue, trying to find organizers. The police complaint that has been filed includes the godman that conducted that sermon. He's a self-styled godman who used to work as a police constable some years ago, and police have also gone to his ashram or his religious center in Uttar Pradesh, but he's not been found yet. And police teams say that they'll try and arrest him and the organizers, because they're saying that the organizers only had permission for 80,000 devotees to attend that gathering, but reports suggest there were 200,000 people crammed into that makeshift shelter.
Well, the stampede is among the worst tragedies in India.
Retribution, a four-corner special series, starts July 15 at ABC and ABC iView.
Today, a land and water search underway for a missing 12-year-old child after a reported crocodile attack in remote Northern Territory. Also ahead, Indian officials work to identify more than 100 people killed in a crowd crush in the country's north. Donald Trump's hush money sentence delayed after yesterday's landmark Supreme Court ruling. And unauthorized photographs of Australian children being used to train artificial intelligence models.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Woodman. Have a good life.